Hey everybody, Matt Barton here with this week's Broker Minute or Two. I hope now that we're close to 2 weeks past the settlement and the new lay of the land, that we're at least starting to get our heads wrapped around this. Of course, there's some additional learnings that are coming about. But you know what? The good news is it seems like a good chunk of business is as usual. And frankly, with rates improving and inventory going up, it's starting to become a better market out there. So look for brighter days ahead. I'll echo what I said on our contracts and negotiation call the other day. If no other year, make it this year that you don't check out in the fall or take your foot off the gas. Rates are lining up at the right time, inventory's higher at the right time, and historically we know a good chunk of our peers check out, and so this will be one of those years you can actually make some significant headway in your business if you stay engaged. Okay, there was one of my minutes. So a lot of questions still going on about compensation. I'm not going to address the whole thing here, so please don't, oh, you forgot to cover this. There's a lot of things. I'm going to cover two things. There's basically two overarching pathways for compensation to be taken care of. One, of course, is with the REPSI, and I'm going to start sharing my screen. This is section 4.3E of the REPSI, and we should all be familiar with this language. It looks a lot like the language that was in the brokerage payment addendum prior to the settlement. One conspicuous thing here, because it's come up a couple of times, is there's no differentiation here in the REPSI of whether this section is talking about gross or net. So if that's of concern, do an addendum and say 4.3E to be based on net purchase price. If you want to be extra good, define what that is. So if you want to exclude closing costs or home warranty or whatever, make that part of the list. It makes it very easy for the other side to understand, and it makes it easy for the title company to get things right on a settlement statement. Okay, so I'm going to go with this section first because this is like really the easy path. I had a conversation with Craig Wagner at the at UAR about this and about an issue, and he said, well, we have a feeling that a lot of agents are just going to eventually end up settling on using what's in the REPSI. And I don't know that I completely disagree, but I don't know that I completely agree. So let me just give you a use case to demonstrate the point. If I went and looked at a $10 million property, make it really extreme to demonstrate the point. Think of anything that has a high compensation value potentially attached to it. If I send over a REPSI before getting this understood, is the seller potentially more or less motivated to make concessions in regards to what they pay on behalf of the buyer to the buyer's brokerage? I think the obvious answer is there's at least an opportunity for them to be less motivated. So I'll paint with a broad brush. In properties of significance, so if it's a property with a ridiculous view that you can't find elsewhere, compared to it's one of 20 cookie cutter condos in the same complex in the same city, you know, I don't know that you're going to lose a whole lot by negotiating it in the REPSI because it's more of a commodity product, and the seller and the seller's agent will be aware of that. I'm not saying that as an absolute statement, but just to kind of demonstrate the point. But if it's of significance, if there is a high potential compensation attached to it, I think I personally would get an agreement before putting forward a REPSI. Okay? So, but the point of this is pathway one, right? And to follow this through down to a settlement statement, on a settlement statement, there is going to be a charge against the seller's proceeds, which will be a credit to the buyer's brokerage. Notice it's not a credit to the buyer because right here it says they're paying to the buyer's brokerage a certain percentage or a certain amount. So that's how this pathway will look on a settlement statement. Okay. The second one is twofold. It's going to involve the ERS and the EBB. And I've had a lot of questions on this, and this is why I was talking to Craig Wagner, and I wanted to share this with you. Painting with a very broad brush again. 2.1 is how much the listing brokerage is going to be paid. If there's no other instructions, nothing else but their home sells what is in section 2.1 is going to be paid to the listing brokerage. Okay? The questions I'm getting are around 2.2. What does this mean? What's its purpose? How does it play? And so there's some conspicuous language that tends to throw people off a little bit, and it's this. Authorization, so it's not contractual obligation, it's authorization to offer compensation to a buyer's brokerage. That's the paragraph, that's the general tone of this, and basically says that we as the listing brokerage are authorized to offer on behalf of either the seller or the company a certain dollar amount or percent, right, of the gross. Notice gross here and gross here. Now, here. So this compensation path does have it defined, okay? And the 2.3 is basically if a REPC is agreed to. Let's say there's nothing negotiated in the REPC by way of compensation, but we did have this, and the buyer's agent had gone the extra step of filling out the real estate brokerage compensation agreement, which basically reiterates what's in the ERS and confirms what they will pay if they accept a REPC from us, which of course means our REPC has to be in their liking, or you will probably get a counter back on this compensation agreement before the seller would sign off on the REPC. Okay, and that can be done because it talks about this will govern unless there's a later compensation agreement. Okay, so it's right here, section 7. It supersedes and replaces any previous compensation agreement. So if initially somebody had sent out and got a 3% here, and then the offer came in low, and the seller's like, I'm only going to pay 2%, fill out a new compensation agreement. Right? Don't sign the REPC until you send this one out and have everybody sign saying, yep, everybody knows it's 2%, and section 7 says this one, the later one, will trump the first one. Okay? And so the interesting thing with all of this is when we have the ERS, when we have the brokerage compensation agreement, how does that trickle through down to the settlement statement? And I'm going to go back to the ERS just to, oops, that's the EBB, the ERS to show this. Section 2.3 says, in the event that the company agrees in written compensation agreement, that's not to be read the REPC. It's talking about the brokerage compensation agreement or some equivalent of that. The seller agrees that payment amount will be added to the brokerage fee referenced in section 2.1. So strangely, in this scenario, if those things happened, then the contract basically takes us back to something similar to that we had pre-settlement. Now, in between that, there's negotiation. That's what was designed. But when it comes to a settlement statement, if the brokerage payment agreement was signed, then the ERS says that the title company can take that amount in the brokerage compensation agreement and add it to section 2.1. And then just like we always saw on a settlement statement, there will be an entry for the portion of compensation that is the seller's brokerage and a section that is for the buyer's brokerage. Compare that to if it's in a REPC, it's going to be a credit from the seller to the buyer's brokerage. Okay? I'm not going to get into the case of what happens if some of it's covered on the REPC and some of it's covered on a brokerage payment agreement. That situation could exist. And just remember, in that ERS, the REPC, it says that what's agreed to here is in addition to any other agreement, so look out for that. But if it's a hybrid, just know that the corresponding documents will govern, and there will be entries on a settlement statement to reflect where those compensation amounts were coming from. I hope that gives you some clarity as to the two pathways, either the REPC or the ERS and the brokerage compensation agreement. Those are the two main pathways and how they will flow through and show up on a settlement statement. And hopefully you have many settlement statements to actually analyze and review. With that, I'm out. This was a long one this week, but hopefully it was good content for you, and I wish you great luck and call with any questions.